Hi, I am Jennifer Purcell, and welcome to my podcast, Living with an Invisible Learning Challenge, where we will discuss, discover, and learn more about the challenges and triumphs of those with NLD and other learning challenges. I do have a website for this podcast, and it is called livingwithnld.com. I also have a Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter account for the podcast. They are all under the same name, which is Living with NLD. I also have a YouTube channel for the podcast, which can be found by Googling the title of the podcast, which is Living with an Invisible Learning Challenge. I would like to tell you about a nonprofit that I use for my research for this podcast. It is called the NVLD Project, and I use their blog for my research. They are a nonprofit that is based in New York and is trying to get NVLD back on the DSM, and they provide many resources for people with NVLD on their website. I'll provide you with the website for them in the podcast description. All proceeds from the ads on this podcast will be donated towards the NVLD project. Please feel free to explore the other topics on the podcast, and hopefully you will learn something new from them. I hope you enjoy today's episodes. Also, I have podcast swag on Markful. I believe that's the name of the website I'm using now. I also have it on Redbubble. I'll give you the links in the description for this podcast episode, and you can take a look. Both websites have different prices, and they have some discounts going on also. And one has t-shirts and some apparel that you can buy and some drinkware. So see which one you would like better. I hope you enjoy the interview that I am posting today. It is with a special ed teacher, Amy, and she is from Portland. Excuse me. My voice is a little scratchy right now. And I had a really fun time doing it with her. Her name is Amy Frazee-Johnson. And I was doing it to ask her again about the difference with teaching during and before the pandemic and after. I was doing that series for a while. I started it last year, and I haven't posted all the interviews yet. So here's another one from that series. I hope you enjoy it.
This meeting is being recorded.
All right, so I'm here today with Amy Frazier, I think.
Frazee-Johnson.
Frazee.
Yeah.
Okay, Johnson. And I will have her start introducing herself.
All right. My name's Amy. My students call me Miss FJ because my last name is hard. I'm a special education teacher in Oregon. I teach kindergarten through 5th grade right now, but I have taught kindergarten through 8th grade is the highest I've taught. And I've been at the school where I am now since the fall of 2019, but I've been teaching. This is my 23rd year teaching.
Wow, that's a lot of experience.
Yeah.
So Amy, in your years of experience, what kind of learning challenges have you experienced with your students?
Well, I've always been a special education teacher. So I've worked with a variety of students that qualify for special education. Sometimes that means that they have a specific learning disability that impacts their reading ability. Often I have students that have more than one thing that's really kind of an obstacle in their path to learning and to education and just, growing up. So I help kids who experience attention differences. I have worked with a lot of kids that are neurodiverse. I've had students who are blind and hard of hearing. I've helped students who use wheelchairs. A lot of things. But my most typical students are kids that have some behavior regulation stuff that they're still trying to figure out and still learning about. And then academics and some behavior stuff is kind of my daily diet.
That's a wide range. It reminds me of the work I used to do before the job I have now. I used to work with kids on the spectrum and ADHD kids, and I also was helping. I had a client who had cerebral palsy as well. So
Yep.
I have a little bit of experience with that. I think the youngest I had was, I think she was barely 1 month or 1 year old, which was a little tricky. And the oldest I think was 10 weeks. So big range too.
I've had students who have cerebral palsy. I've had I get to work with a team, so I have specialists that come in and help me, like physical therapists. If there's like accessibility to the bathroom issues, somebody else helps me figure that out. So I have a team to bounce ideas off of.
That's good. Are there certain subjects that you help your students with?
Almost everybody gets help with reading. Not everybody, but almost everybody. I do reading, I do written language, I do mathematics, and then I have different groups for social skills and some executive functioning regulation. Sometimes we just have some appropriate play groups if the kids are younger. Right now, I should say the past couple years, I've been working with mostly 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders. So there's still been some play group with that, but it's more like a social time and just working with kids making those choices in the moment when they're learning about social interaction. But so usually at least half my day is teaching reading and writing. And then the other half is doing a lot of social skills and math. And then I help kids also with things that they have. All of my students are placed in a general ed classroom, and then they come to me or I go into them to help. Or sometimes I'm just a consult to the teacher if it's something that they're kind of working their way toward more of a general ed career. But usually I see all of my students each day of the week for at least something.
Yeah, that seems like you help in a lot of different areas. Are there, one of the other questions I was thinking about is, I know sometimes even though a student is neurodiverse, they tend to excel in one area that, is different from the one that have challenges. You have that experience as well?
Well, sure. Yeah. I mean, sometimes I can think of just a couple of students that I've been working with for the past few years where they might have just beautiful handwriting and gorgeous storytelling skills. Although and then when they get to talking to somebody in person, it might not be expressed as clearly. So something like that. I had a student who was on the spectrum and had a lot of obstacles when it got to like social stuff, but he was an incredible artist, just incredibly gifted, and had this eye for style and color that was just really unique and very interesting. So, sometimes that would bring people into his world. And then other kids who are just like super science minded. So many kids that are super science minded. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. I know for myself, I duty my assurance with you that I have NLD, and for me, I was never good at math until I got a lot of tutoring with it, and but I always excelled at science and history, and I got better at writing when I had help with that as well, because it was hard for me to, when I was growing up, it was hard to even pull a paragraph out of me.
Sure. And that's more common than having that kind of, that being your thing to go to for every student. Honestly, writing is really hard in elementary school, especially.
For me. So let's see what was what do you like best and least about your teaching since you've had so many years of doing it?
I mean, the best thing is always my relationship with students. And, you know, I'm very lucky. One of the things I really like about my job is that because I am a resource teacher, and so I'm not their classroom teacher, sometimes I get to see kids all the way from kindergarten through 5th grade. And so I've had kids, the longest student I ever had was probably 6 years. Maybe 7 years, actually. I think I've had kids for 7 years because maybe they'll have repeated a grade or something. I've never had a kid from like their whole K through 8, but I love watching them grow up, and I love talking with kids and seeing how they think about things and trying to adjust my teaching style to a way that will be really digestible for them. The thing I like the least is definitely the paperwork. I think every special ed teacher probably has the same answer for that. It sucks time. It takes us away from being able to do the planning that we want to do. It's stressful. It's the thing that will ultimately, you know, make me throw my hands up and just like be like, I need a summer break.
I can understand that. I don't like paperwork either. Yeah, and it must be really cool and make you appreciate your work to be able to see one of your students or many of your students progress for many years. And
oh yeah, especially when there's like a student who hasn't been able to like really break that social code, and all of a sudden they start like having friends. That's the best.
Yeah. I think it's good that you work on social things too, because I know I used to struggle a lot in that area too. Still a little bit, but not as much as I used to. And I think that's really important for kids to be able to have good skills. So during the pandemic, what kind of changed for you with your teaching? You know, how did it get harder?
Right. So where we were, it was March of 2020 was when my district said, okay, we're going to go on spring break. And we're going to add an extra week to spring break. They genuinely thought that was just going to be an extra week of spring break, and then we'd all come back, you know. We didn't. we had 2 weeks of spring break, and then they said, we're going to go online. And there was no preparation for that. Teachers scrambled, and we tried to set up a platform. And we had kind of, you know, like check-ins with our class. There were assignments given, but mostly, from my perspective, what I remember is specialists functioned more like social workers for a few months. And we got kids food. Like our school is a community where kids get food at school. So we were delivering boxes. We were connecting students' families to resources to pay their electric bill, things like that, just for the first 3 months of COVID. And then we went on summer. And then over the summer, the district made much more of a plan for online learning. And then we really had, they called it comprehensive distance learning is what, and so CDL in our district. And then that was like really intensive school days online. I would do push in, if you will, like I would go into a gen ed classroom's Zoom meeting or Google Meet and be a part of that community during the lesson. And then I had double duty because then I would immediately take students into another small group Google Meet and give them their service time that way. And so sometimes it was, I needed to be in the Zoom meeting or the Google Meets meeting with the gen ed classroom just to know what they were even talking about. And then I would tailor my services at that time to really getting them to just access school online as much as they could. And sometimes actually some of those groups ended up being social skills groups, which was connecting kids that wouldn't have otherwise known each other online. And that some of those turned out really well. Some of it was very hard for sure. The biggest challenge for me was probably that I also had my own 2 children at home doing online school simultaneously. And so we had to kind of split around the house so we wouldn't hear each other. And then also I couldn't help them as much as I would have liked to for their online school community or experience.
What ages are your children?
My daughter is now 15 and my son is 13. So when we started this, my son was still in 5th grade, I think, and now he's going into 8th grade. So yeah. Oh, and then I should say, we did go to hybrid, maybe halfway through the school year, where we did the mornings online and then afternoons in the building with a limited population. And it kind of was, there were cohorts. So only kids were only exposed to certain people throughout their school time. That worked okay for a lot of my students. They liked coming in later for sure. And like, having the morning online and then in person in the afternoon. But we didn't catch everybody was the problem, is there were so many kids who just, they couldn't come in because of health concerns or their families were concerned, or they just didn't really access school. For some kids, it was like a year off of school.
Yeah, I remember hearing that on the news. So how does that kind of compare to now, after the pandemic kind of ending? What's changed?
Yeah, well, one of the challenges is that we came back and we knew that there were going to be challenges, but we also were kind of like, we're doing it like we used to. School is the old style, right? And we still had some kids who were very anxious about COVID, about getting sick. And then we were still masking and social distancing, and those rules changed throughout the year. But I think there were 2 just almost disabling factors last year for teachers. And one was we kept getting sick. And so we were out. And then there was I got COVID one time in February of this year. And so I had to be out for a week. And then there were no subs. There's just a drastic sub shortage. So whenever people were out, when I was out, when my coworkers were out, we were all just scrambling, covering each other, trying to make sure that kids got what they needed, that they were safe. But school was not the same. It was not as organized. It was not as well staffed. It was really hard. And then the second piece, because I said there were 2 things, is kids came back really different. Like they had a year away from being socially exposed and kind of sticking at home. And I feel like there was a real drop in empathy in our school population. There was kids just were bristly with each other, really not ready to be in the space with other kids. They were more likely to just bicker, not like full on fighting, but just really grumpy about having to do work. Just really, I don't know, just more, I guess, focused on survival maybe than learning. And so that impacted a lot of our community with social interactions got a lot more challenging. And so the students that I work with ended up feeling, I think, more marginalized because kids weren't as welcoming and empathetic about, everybody's different. And it was more like, take care of yourself, which was hard.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Kind of made me think of for my current job where I work for a spiritual community, and we have a preschool there. And we've had challenges with being able to find teachers for our classrooms because of the pandemic. And I remember during the pandemic, we didn't have preschool for maybe almost for a year. I think it was half a year. And we kept on our director and our 2 teachers that we had then. And then in the early part of the pandemic, when we were back with preschool, we lost one of those two teachers because she wanted to go back to school. And then we still had our director and 1 teacher.
Yeah.
And then earlier this year, we just got another teacher. So we had two teachers, but then unfortunately, she was trying to find a home to live in, and she did find a house, but in Temecula, which is kind of far from San Diego.
Sure.
So now we're back to one teacher, one director. So
it's surreal. We're about to start our school year. The students start the day after Labor Day, so September 6th, I think it is. And we are still hiring. We're still trying to find positions to fill positions in our building. And usually we don't wait this long. It's really hard.
Yeah, it is challenging. And I don't know if we experienced this, but one thing we experienced during the pandemic was when we were looking for teachers, we found out that some people would say that they're going to attend an interview just to get unemployment still, and they wouldn't show up for the interview.
Oh, yeah. There has been an unusual thing here where somebody will kind of say, I want to accept the job, but I'm also considering this other job. And we really need people to just be like, yes or no, so we can either move on or start working together.
Yeah, that would make it be difficult. So one question I kind of was curious about was for your, during the pandemic, since you do sometimes go into the general ed classes, do you think it was harder for the special ed or the general ed students?
I don't know that I could say it was harder for either population. I think it was hard for everybody in their own way. And sometimes, like in the school where I work, there are a lot of families who experience houselessness. They might be families that move from kind of couch surfing from house to house for a while. It was really hard for kids in that population because they didn't always, we provided technology so they could connect to us. And we tried to, as a district, they would go drive a school bus around, and I don't know the technology here, so you'll have to forgive me, but with some sort of a hotspot for internet access. If kids couldn't get it through their home, then they would try to set up hotspots around the area so kids could still access school, but it was hard. My heart tends to go to the community that I work with. And so I think I saw a lot of the things that were hard about it for kids that had, some sort of a difference. But I don't know. I think it's been hard on everybody, honestly.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think it's different for everybody. You were answering this one a little bit already, but it seemed like you were able to provide some of the hands-on support to your students during the pandemic.
Yeah, I did a lot of driving to kids' houses to drop off materials and then kind of ringing the doorbell and standing way back when we were still really distanced and then kind of talking to them from a distance and saying, those are your materials for this, this, and this. And then I would have, an example where I would say, okay, get out your book that looks like this online and hold it up so that they could look through their things. I didn't get a lot of my materials back, which was a big financial loss for my room. But in the meantime, kids had what they needed. I got really good at dropping things off at kids' houses for them. But I think, the day-to-day check-ins, when we were first online, after we had that 2 weeks off and we came back online, I had students who were worried. They were just worried that the whole world had gotten COVID and nobody was coming back. It was, kid mentality is just different. And so they just wanted to see that I was alive and okay, and so for a while that was the reassuring part, I think, for them, that we would get through it.
So one question that I'm sure is that you probably experienced a little bit in your school. I was wondering how you deal with bullying when it comes up.
Yeah, I mean, we try to have a very empathetic, we have fantastic adults in my school, and we have a real empathetic community. And normally, like before COVID, that trickles down to the kids have a lot of empathy for each other too. And so you can have real good conversations with kids that are heart-based, about why we're all in a community together and why everybody is, an equal part of that. I think we still do that. And when things that are bullying, or maybe not full bullying, but something that's just a really just not equal kind of relationship that's happening, or there's picking on, or anybody's giving anybody like, being cruel to them or anything, we do a lot of trying to repair those relationships, and also talk with students about, like, it's okay for you to just walk away from that too. You don't have to if the other person is not being kind, you don't have to bring your A game of kindness. You can walk away and get help. You can, seek a lot of times there's students have like one or two adults that are their people that they really trust in the building. And so they'll go to those people. And like, so I have kids come to me and, in great frustration. Usually that requires some time to calm down and kind of get their feet back under them, and then see what's happening and talk it through. And then we make a plan. I mean, I've had kids sign contracts with me about like the kind of language they're going to use with each other and things like that. And we do lessons on that. But for the most part, kids just kind of get on each other's nerves, and it's not like a bullying situation. And in those situations, we can do, like a structured play group, and kind of with me modeling how to interact, especially if they're like really good friends, but they also drive each other crazy, which tends to be most of the kids that I have somebody like that, it seems like.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Let's see. What do you think would have made it easier for neurotypical to understand, where special ed students come from, and being able to try to understand how both of them have something that makes them unique, and being able to, try to empathize with them.
I mean, I think celebrating kids' strengths, really obviously celebrating what they're good at, is a place to start. Sometimes kids are surprised that the quiet kid who is usually kind of in his own space and kind of doing his own thinking might be like really gifted in something that they're really struggling at. They're like, oh my gosh, like that just changed my whole perspective of that student. Yeah. A lot of times what surprises them is when the kid who they think maybe isn't like them at all starts talking about Minecraft or something that they love. And so if you can find common ground, I remember, some of the gen ed students going, oh, he likes Minecraft? And then I'll be like, tell him about Minecraft. And they like forge a friendship over, that, or, just games that they want to play on the playground sometimes. It's kind of that the times that are purely social are both like challenging, but also can be rich with like those connection times. Like if somebody wants to talk about dinosaurs and they find their little tribe who wants to talk about dinosaurs, they're golden. And a lot of times that happens, that starts in the classroom and makes its way outside, which is fun.
Yeah, that's good. What do you wish your special ed students would know more about the neurotypical ones that they interact with? Go the other way.
I wish that my students who experience like a rigidity could understand that they don't have to be as good at everything as everybody else. They're going to have their own areas that they do well, and there are going to be things that are hard for them. And I wish that they could see that other kids also have things that are hard for them, because I think that's hard. I think they see like kids who are excelling, say in reading, like they just kind of assume they're good at everything. Where like we all have ups and downs, and The sooner kids see like, okay, I don't have to compete with that person. I'm just trying to be the best version of me. That's the best.
Yeah,
And I
I
think
would.
that goes both ways, right?
Mhm.
Everybody.
Right. Yeah, I agree with you on that. I know when I'm comparing myself to my older brother, my older neurotypical brother, and I do that. I used to do that a lot when I was little and see, oh, he's excelling in math and I'm not, like you were
Hmm.
saying, and then realizing, oh, wait a second, we get that down to other areas of the math. I just don't see them, you know. So
And
that's
those
very
people can
true.
be somebody that's a support to you, right? Like if you see,
Hmm.
instead of competition, if you see like, oh, this is a person I could go to for some advice or to ask some help, then that's
Right.
great too. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very true. When I was in college, I definitely went to my brother for help because we both went to the same college at different times, but he could help me. He knew what
Yeah.
the academic level was like. Um, so when you're in your classroom with your students, or the different classrooms as well, what kind of environment do you usually try to have for your students?
I mean, my goal is always that kids feel like their dignity is intact and that it's a safe space to try something hard.
Hmm.
So my goal for my room is that it's a calm place, it's a friendly place, and it's a safe place. And so kids can come in here, even if it's kids that, the only thing that they're really struggling with is decoding reading. I want them to be able to come in here and think like, this is the thing that's been so hard for me. And in this space, I'm okay. It's okay to try. It's okay if I make mistakes in here. It's okay. No one's going to ridicule me. I don't need to ridicule myself. This is a space where I'm learning how to do that, and that's okay. So I mean, I try to keep the room environment very calm because of that.
Hmm.
But I'm ridiculously enthusiastic too. So like kids know they can count on me to be their cheerleader if they need it. So
Yeah. We- When you were describing that, that reminds me of my mom because uh, she kind of, in my relationship with her is interesting where she's not only my mom, but she's also my boss at work because
oh yeah.
I work for her. So, but for me, that is actually a good thing because, she knows so much about my learning challenge and what makes me neurodiverse. She's able to help me learn from my mistakes and being able to give me the feedback that I need. And,
Oh, I'm sure
you know,
that's helpful, right? She knows you almost as well as you know
yeah,
yourself,
and
probably.
sometimes even better, of course. Yeah. And many times she said to me, Jennifer, you don't have to worry about me letting you go or firing. I'm not going to do that because you're my daughter and I want you to learn from your mistakes. So, similar environments where you have for your students of being able to, you know, feel safe or messing up and try to improve on that.
Yeah, it's safe to fall down.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
you need that. Um, have you had any previous special ed students that did better than you thought they would in their education career?
I mean, I always think my kids are gonna shoot for the stars. So
Mm-hmm.
I have had some kids that surprise me in like
Mm-hmm.
the path that they choose. And the kind of and I'll think kids are like somebody who's like super science minded, and I'll think, oh, well, he's gonna definitely go into this kind of work. And then we'll end up, doing a writing job or something that I didn't expect, something totally different. Um, yeah, and then sometimes like as kids are little, when they're like in kindergarten or first grade, I have an idea of them. And then by the time they get to fifth grade, they're in like a different, like they're just so cool or, like funny, or some kids get genuinely funny, which is always a delight. But yeah, I mean, sometimes they still surprise me for sure.
Yeah.
The thing that surprises me the most is sometimes like the things that come out of their mouth though. Like, oh, you went that way. Okay, I didn't expect that.
Yeah, I can imagine that. Do you ever like kind of meet up with your students that you had in the past to see how they're doing now?
I mean, like at school things, yes, I
Mhm.
don't socially. There's a lot of guidance for teachers to, not
Right.
engage too socially with students, and but I'll keep in touch with their parents sometimes.
Mhm.
Sometimes I'll have parents that their kid was really successful with me in elementary school, and then they're maybe in high school, and the parents will seek me out for some advice. Like, here's what's
Mhm.
going on. Do you have advice for how to approach it? And by the way, my advice is always be collaborative, stick your ground, but I'll also be friendly about it.
Mm.
Because I think parents think they have to have the hard, you know, sometimes if they want to get something that they're not getting, they have to be like really firm about it. And you
Mhm.
can do that. You can be really firm, but you can still be respectful.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Um, so you were going to the parents. I was wondering kind of how they try to help their kids during the pandemic with the traumas they were having.
Yeah, well, it was varied for sure, because some of the parents that my students, are at home with were essential workers, and so they were
Mhm.
not home. They had to go to work. Some of them are in, medical fields, and so they were, doing the whole uh, kind of dress down in the hallway outside before they came
Mhm.
in, and so they wouldn't, because people were so cautious in the early days about, even your clothing. Um, and then
Mhm.
other kids, really thrived because their parents were there encouraging them and making sure that they did their assignments on time. Some
Mhm.
of that, like that could go either way though, because some kids that was really great for them and they learned a ton and they got school routines and it was great. And then other kids were just kind of like, just do it for me. And so we've seen
Mhm.
plenty of that where parents had a heavy hand in their work, and maybe the kids looked like they were learning more than they actually were. And so coming back to school was a little bit of a rough awakening when you don't have mom and dad to help you do your work.
Yeah, that makes sense. I remember that. I remember when I jumped from high school where I had you know, access to tutors for every subject if needed. And then I went to UC Berkeley for college, and that went away. And I was like, oh, like, you know, oh crap. But like, how do I access the help I need? Because I wasn't used to seeking it. My parents didn't, seeked it for me. Um, but basically, I was like, okay, well, I know I struggle in math, so I'm gonna go to the degree center for that. And I did that, and I got the help I needed. And then I wasn't diagnosed until college with MLD, so I didn't know I had that. So then once I got that diagnosis, I got my accommodations for that, and that made it a lot easier as well
Yeah,
for my last 2 years.
it's interesting. And I think that's probably more common for women than for men to have that experience,
Mm.
honestly, because I think boys present things a lot more boisterously, and girls are
Mhm.
so like I don't I speak for myself and my limited experience, but I feel like girls are so much more socially minded that like
Mhm.
figure it out how to like kind of do it within the social parameters. And then when you're out on your own, it's kind of like, oh wait, I still need all those supports.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
makes sense to me actually. Like you were saying, it's probably more obvious with the male, but it might be more reserved with the female, and that's so obvious. Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, so also with the parents, I know sometimes, well, they, at least from my experience with parents with special ed kids, sometimes they think they have the right answer and a better answer than their special ed teacher. Have you had that experience before?
I mean, yes, it's rare that somebody really bulldozes,
Mm.
but it does happen. Usually, if families want something different than what the school is able to offer, that becomes a big conversation.
Mhm.
I personally have never had a situation that got really heated and became like a legal situation, but it
Mhm.
happens, and it happens to good teachers. It's not just, it's sometimes it's limited resources for the district, and we have to work with what we have. Sometimes the families want something that's not best, that we don't feel is the best choice for the child, and they do.
Mhm.
So sometimes those things happen, but mostly mostly parents are awesome and they want their kids to survive and thrive, and that's what we want too. And so if they feel like we're on the same page with them, I think they're more likely to give us a chance to try our thing.
Oh, that's good.
I really like my students, and I think that comes across to parents. Like, I really enjoy them, and I've never had a student I just didn't vibe with. And so it's, I think parents know that. And I think kids talk about me at home and like the things we did. And so they see that we're working and that the kids are excited about it. So they like that.
That's good. Yeah, it probably makes it easier for the parent to be involved when their child talks at home about school.
Yeah, I know. And especially because like once they start getting older, they don't talk about much at school. So how's your day? Fun?
That was pretty much it for the questions, unless you have any that you wanted to add.
No, I think it's great. I do think it's an exceptional time in education, but in the world, we're going back into this school year, like, okay, back at it. And I don't know, I feel like we're not really out of like that kind of hangover that's going to happen. I don't know how long that's going to last, but the kiddos that are coming into, well, I have a student who's coming into second grade who has never been in person because he stayed online. So his first experience in the school community, because his whole experience was all online. So
that would be interesting.
Yeah, he's nervous, but we've got him.
Yeah, I wouldn't have thought that would have happened, but of course it could have happened if they choose to stay online, right?
Yeah. Well, and another interesting thing that we didn't expect was every year states give statewide testing.
Right.
And so last year was the first year we gave it, because when we were online, we didn't do it. And then when we went to COVID the first time, we didn't do it. So usually kids start state testing in Oregon in third grade, and then they get a little more testing in fourth grade and a little bit more in fifth grade, and then they go into middle school with that schedule. But last year was the first year that our third graders, fourth graders, and fifth graders did state testing. So everybody was brand new to it. Nobody had any experience with it. It was challenging. It took a long time, but I'd much rather do our day-to-day stuff than that, for sure.
Yeah, I didn't like doing state testing. I remember when I was in my last year of doing that in high school, I was like, yes. I'm done.
For real.
Thank you for letting me interview you. It was a joy.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope you have a good rest of your day.
Great. Thank you. And keep me posted. Email me or something when you have things evolving.
So one of my sponsors for this podcast is called Patreon, and that is a site where you can go on and donate money to creators who you would like to support. And I have 3 different tiers that you can do for my podcast, Living with Invisible Learning Challenge. You can donate $2 to access content with no ads, or you can do $5 if that's your desired amount. You can also do $1 if you can only do that. And that's also very appreciative. And if you want to, you can do $10, and then you can get no ads for that episode. And I also have some episodes where I have transcripts for them now. And when I say transcript, I mean I've been able to try to type out the words to some of the episodes, and I'm still working on developing that. I have a program that I can only do like 1 episode each month, depending on how long that episode is. So I'm trying to use that program rather than typing it out myself, because I'm not very fast at typing. And with my migraine condition, sometimes I'm in too much pain to do much. So I use that program, and please go onto Patreon, and I will give you the link in the podcast description like I usually do with most links. Otherwise, it's patreon.com/living with an invisible learning challenge, no spaces. And I hope that you will feel called to donate to that. Thank you. And today I am very excited to announce that BetterHelp is now sponsoring this podcast. I have had 7 years of therapy, so I know it can help change your life if you not only let it, but work on the personal goals that you set with your therapist. Without a healthy mind, being truly happy and at peace is hard. The good news is therapy works. But what is therapy exactly? It's whatever you want it to be. Maybe you're not feeling motivated right now and would like some tools to help. Or maybe you're feeling insecure in relationships at work, not dealing well with stress. Whatever you need, it's time to stop being ashamed of normal human struggles and start feeling better because you deserve to be happy. And now you don't have to worry about finding an in-person therapist near you to help. BetterHelp is customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist, so you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. It's more affordable than in-person therapy, and you can start communicating with your therapist in under 48 hours. Join the millions of people who are seeing what online therapy is really about. It's always a good time to invest in yourself because you are the greatest asset. And special offering to listeners of Living with an Invisible Learning Challenge. You can get 10% off your first month of professional therapy at betterhelp.com/ I'll put in the link in the podcast description for you. That's BetterHelp, HELEP. Thanks again to BetterHelp for sponsoring this podcast. As I wrap up, there are some things I would like to share with you. I do have a website for this podcast. It is called livingwithnld.com. I also have a Facebook and Instagram page for this podcast. It is called Living with NLD. I will include the links for those in the description. In conclusion, I would like to hear from my audience. If you know individuals with NLD that I could interview for this podcast, please email me at livingwithnld@gmail.com. What are you interested in learning about NLD? I know I'm not an expert, but I do know I have the living experience of having it. I would like you to practice journaling about your gifts and differences. Also see if there is a way that you can make that difference become easier for you to do than it originally was. Thank you for listening today, and please go to my YouTube channel and subscribe to it. Thank you. Bye.